Time for another board meeting recap podcast. How are you today, Dr. Smith?
I tell you what, it's a great day to be alive.
It is. Nice sunny day here in February. So,
Yeah,
past the winter weather that we
that's right.
experienced recently. So,
Doubled the temperature from just a few days ago.
yes,
Everything's
sir.
good.
Very much so. And before we get started into this, we actually have a couple of special guests today. So, we'll go ahead and start with our first special guest. That is Mr. Daryl Angermeyer. Daryl, you're the Chief Facilities Officer, and we are very happy to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. And funny thing is, David, we actually refer to Daryl and his team just about every time we have one of these board meeting recaps. So
Certainly do.
we thought, why not bring him in and several items from last night at the meeting that were on the agenda that fell under Daryl's area. So we'll just have him address those when we get to them.
And I'd love for the public to see and to understand all the planning and foresight that Daryl and his crew put in place for the benefit of our students and our staff and our entire community.
Yeah, we often see the outcomes. We always see the outcomes, but sometimes you rarely see all the work and effort that goes in planning to achieve those outcomes. So a good opportunity to talk about that today. So we'll start last night with good news. Dr. Smith recognized several things on our good news report. First of all, Central High School has a bowling team. They made it to state. People may not realize that. It's not necessarily a sanctioned sport. It's what we call a club sport. But that doesn't mean those students and their families aren't extremely dedicated. So they actually finished 9th in the state, the Central Bowling team, and one of their individuals placed 24th in the state. So I'm not much of a bowler. Don't know if you are, but certainly impressed with what they accomplished.
I'm not either. My golf score kind of mimics what I think the bowling score should be, and vice versa. My bowling score is typically
Maybe
what
they're
you want
flipped.
the golf score to be. But
Exactly.
I tell you what, that takes a lot of talent to
Yeah,
throw that
definitely.
ball down the lane and knock those pins down.
Yeah, one of 3 high school bowling teams. So if people didn't know that, kudos to Central's
Yeah.
team. Also, congratulations to students out at EVSC, Southern Indiana Career and Technical Center. Of course, we've talked before. We have numerous programs out there. It's an amazing facility. We do have a radio TV program there, and those students were in a state competition in their region recently, and they put together what we call broadcast-ready public service announcements, just like you would hear on the radio, and they finished in both first and second place in their division. So congratulations to those students.
Yep. Very, very proud of them.
Also, we recognized our own Jackie Barnett. She's the director of ESL, which is a very large program here in EVSC, and also in charge of our district data. And she was named a 2022 Rising Star by the Girl Scouts of Southwestern Indiana. So we're always happy to see our dedicated employees recognized by outside organizations. And then last but not least, just talked briefly last night about the ongoing amazing program that's in our local area called Cops Connecting with Kids. They just returned from another trip to Walt Disney World. I think 72 students participated this year, not just from Evansville. They actually branched out, I believe, to Henderson and Princeton. And just the amazing work that goes into the planning and the fundraising and the donating to make those trips possible. And you just don't see around the nation community partnerships between educators and students and families and law enforcement agencies like you do here in Evansville. And it's just amazing.
It really is. It's a model for the nation.
Yeah, most definitely. So kudos to all of them. They had a great experience, and more than anything, happy for the kids that got to participate in that this year. So then that wraps up good news. Dr. Smith takes us into consent items. You want to hit the beginning of that, and then we'll even call on Daryl here for one of his.
You bet. Item 2.01 be consideration of the minutes of the January 24th, 2022 board meeting. So individuals can click on that and then actually click on what looks like to be a clock where it says view minutes, and then you can pull those minutes up. Item 2.02 is consideration of allowance of payments. So last night the board approved the payment of $10,259,460.04, and the breakdown would be invoices of about $1.4 million. We had contract bus driver payments of $224,000, a net payroll of $5.5 million, and then payroll obligations of slightly over $3 million, and then cafeteria expenses of about $14,600. That makes up that balance of $10.2 million. Moving
Okay.
on then to item 2.3, and I think this would be an excellent opportunity for Daryl to expand on what that change order actually.
And when you talk about that,
Mhm.
Daryl, define what you mean too by change order, because that's a term Dr. Smith and I refer to all the time in these.
Yeah, so a change order is after you sign a contract for a project. If there's any type of change, it is thoroughly documented through the architect or engineer, and then brought to a board meeting for
And
approval.
is that for changes that sometimes you may not anticipate until you get down into the middle of a project?
Yeah, so it's our goal. We strive to keep change orders to a minimum, but sometimes things do arise. Like this one here was a feed water valve that was an existing valve, and during the commissioning process of this project, we noticed it wasn't controlling right, and we also noticed a small leak in the pipe. So we just had the contractor, since they were already there and set up, make the repair and replace the valve.
So, two things, if you could elaborate a little bit on, first of all, conditioning
Mhm.
and what that means, and
Yeah.
then, well, and the reason why it was important for the contractor to replace that pipe
Yes.
instead of us when it
Yeah.
comes to warranty.
Yeah, so with every project, we commission them to make sure that it's operating the way it was designed, that we got what we paid for. And this particular valve just was not controlling right, and it was changing the operation of the boiler. Um, so at that time, we had them change it because if the EVSC, we do have a great in-house staff, but if we would change that valve, it may affect the warranty of the boiler a little bit. So we have the contractor do it. So if there's a problem during the warranty period with the boiler, there's one company to call.
Yeah, and I think I said conditioning, and
Yeah.
I did mean commissioning, so thank you very much for that.
Mhm.
And when you talk about this, first of all, just so everybody realizes, we're talking about the AIS Diamond campus.
Yeah.
Some people may think of that as the old North High
Yes.
School on Diamond Avenue, and
Mhm.
that's now AIS. When you talk about a steam boiler,
Yeah.
let's just be real basic
Mhm.
here and clear for people. What are we talking about there?
So basically, it's just like it sounds. Diamond AIS has 3 steam boilers, and it's an older system where you actually boil water and make steam to heat the rest of the building through the radiators, through the air handlers, and the univents. So yeah, basically, uh, almost all of our new buildings have like hot water boilers. Some of our old ones have steam boilers.
And really, when you're maintaining these steam boilers, though, they I've been in that building before where it's extremely warm in cold weather. So they do a very nice job of heating the
It,
facility.
it is an excellent heating system.
Okay. All right. Well, and that's why we bring Daryl in today, Dr. Smith, to give us the nitty gritty details. You want to pick back up with consent?
You bet. Item 2.04 is the consideration to approve academic evaluator agreements. So, when we have students undergo testing for special education services and the like, there clearly are time bound metrics that we have to adhere to. So, this just adds to our capacity in order to do that in a timely fashion. So we ask for two folks to come under contract with us to help us when we have an abundance of work to do and not the appropriate level of staffing to get that done. So they will make certain that we stay in compliance with those timelines. And then item 2.05, consideration to approve fine arts private music instructor agreements. I think this is something that also is really sets EVSC apart.
It's exciting. I'm anxious to hear you talk about this for a bit.
So several years ago, there was a benefactor that approached EVSC's foundation, and music was very, very important to him growing up, as it was to his children when he had students in our schools. And he wanted to give back to the community, to the corporation. So he set up a fund that would pay for instruction for individuals, then to basically provide private instruction for our students, regardless of parents' ability to pay. So when we think about an opportunity for all students to have access to high quality private music instruction. This is an opportunity for our kids to have that. And I think it is such a unique program. Parents don't pay for this, the foundation pays 100% of the bill.
And maybe you have. I know certainly I have simply not heard of a lot of programs like this outside of AVSC where you have this partnership and you have these private instructors.
I don't know of another partnership between the school corporation's foundation, private music instructors, to where that service, that very valuable service, is provided to anyone that wants to access that free of charge.
And speaks volumes about the generosity of people in our community and a donor like this who made this vision come to reality a number of years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay. That wraps up then consent. That takes us into personnel.
And as I typically say with personnel, item 3.01, that the listing is there for individuals. They can certainly click on that and they can see the personnel changes that were approved by the board last night.
Okay, great. And then that takes us into two action items, and we've already heard Daryl in consent earlier, and now you're back with us now, Daryl, to look at these two action items. So, looks like both of these do have to do with HVAC systems. One at Harrison and one at the Culver Family Learning Center. So, do you want to talk to us about these two projects?
Absolutely. The one at Harrison's first. This is a very interesting project. There's two large air handlers mounted above the auditorium at Harrison High School. Both of them are about the size of a vehicle, and there's only a spiral stairwell to get to this area. So, as part of this project, we have to remove the brick out of a wall up on the roof to actually disassemble the air handlers and to get the new ones in. So, that's kind of unique for us to have to go to that type of extreme to replace them. Um, these air handlers were original, and air conditioning was added to them about 25 years ago. So, they definitely need
Time
replaced.
for an upgrade then.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the next one, project at Culver Family Learning Center.
Yes. So this replaces about 60% of the air conditioning at Culver. It's everything that's served by an air handler. And with the Harrison project and with this project, they were installed years ago and they were both controlled with pneumatics. Now they will be controlled digitally through the internet. So as we install these products or projects, we can control the amount of outdoor air brought in, time schedules. We can do that all remotely versus having to go to a school, which makes it a lot more efficient.
And for someone who's hearing this and maybe hasn't been by the Culver Family Learning Center recently, they may be thinking, wait, I didn't think that was a typical traditional school anymore because it used to be an elementary school, actually an original historic building, and now it's not. But we've repurposed that. It's used for early learning programs and really for a number of departments that use that. So really that facility needs to be maintained because it's used really the entire facility, correct?
Every space is used at that building.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So we need to make sure we maintain that.
Mhm.
And while we're talking about this,
Yep.
Daryl, last night I know this came up in the board meeting. I
Yeah.
know Dr. Smith asked you about this as well. Talk to us a bit about how your department is having to be so focused in the times we live in with the pandemic, with supply chain issues, how you're having to look further out in terms of ordering. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the pandemic has really increased the lead times on all products. So even though we're just now bringing this to the board for approval, we've been working with the engineer for 8 months to a year, talking to the manufacturer. Will they be able to get this project here on time? So we've been working closely with all groups involved, and with any like HVAC project, even though it's approved now, we will not start that project until all equipment is on site, just in case if you would run into a lead time issue. But
You're not going to dismantle those air handlers and then all of a sudden run
Nope.
into a long delay and then we don't have appropriate HVAC.
absolutely, but we are ordering them in plenty enough time to get them here. But yes, we will not start until it's here.
And I know, Dr. Smith, you've lifted that many times how fortunate we are that has such a dedicated department to make sure of issues like this. We even had a board member say how he's experienced it with building a home now because it's just not easy to get things in. If you don't plan accordingly, projects won't get done.
I think that's well said. And if you think about it from a homeowner's perspective, if your air conditioning unit would go out and you call a contractor in to have them replace that air conditioning unit, you expect that handler to be replaced that afternoon or the next day. Not quite the case with the kind of air handlers that we have.
Yeah, yeah. These projects get really large scale because you have the removal process and then in the installation. So they do take majority of the summer to get them completed.
And these air handlers are not off the shelf kind of products.
Now, every one of them is almost custom built for this project. Like if you ever have an issue with these air handlers, you pull up the serial numbers, it's listed Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation. And, we do plan ahead because the EVSC has a lot of activities from like lunch sites, summer school. So we start working with academics months ago just to make sure nothing's going on at this site when this project takes place.
And I think the public might be somewhat surprised, but approximately how many square feet do we have under roof?
So under roof, it's getting close to 6 million square feet.
Yeah, that's 6 million square feet
Mm.
under roof that
Yeah.
we that we have the responsibility to care for, and that I think is a tremendous responsibility. And
Yeah.
I know you alluded to this already, Jason, but Daryl and his folks do a phenomenal job. And if the public would question any of that, you simply have to look at the parking lots and the sidewalks from the last weather event that we had. When we were able to return to school on Monday, every parking lot, every sidewalk that we had was dry and was in great shape. And I know Daryl said, if for some reason we can't go to school on Monday, it's not going to be because our lots and our sidewalks are not ready. He takes care of our kids and our staff, and he and his entire crew, and we are indebted to him.
Well, if those things don't happen, school doesn't happen, right?
Right.
And you just
Yeah.
told me last night, I believe, how many individuals did you say really were working both Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with the winter
Yeah.
storm?
Well, we had about 65 maintenance and custodial employees working.
And it took
Get-
them all 3 days of really hard work to get that ice removed,
Yes, it
correct?
did. And then that's very proud of our EVSC in-house staff. It's, when we remove snow, we don't have to get on a waiting list because we do it in-house. A lot of people do not know we have HVAC technicians, electricians, plumbers, locksmiths, so we can really streamline the work when something happens.
Well,
If there's an emergency, we can respond immediately.
and because of that work, we were able to be back in school yesterday morning. So we're very fortunate about that. Let's jump ahead,
Yep.
Daryl. Then usually we don't skip items, but since you're here, I'd like to
Mhm.
do that. So we're going to go to item 5.05 under information. Tell us a little bit about the exterior painting project at Cedar Hall.
Yes, so I mean, you probably noticed if you've been by Cedar Hall, it's kind of faded. It's getting some black streaks to the outside. We're totally renovating the outside of the building with a new product that is mold and mildew resistant, and we will be changing the colors not to show the black streaks like in the future. So we're hoping to get 15 plus years out of this
And
new
it's
building.
kind of had kind of that, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, kind of a rainbow effect, a multicolored look to that building,
Yes,
which is not terribly old.
yeah.
And I think you've said you're going to go with more of a single color, or at least some accent colors with
Yeah, we're
the
trying to get
traditional.
down to 3 colors and colors that will stand up to the elements better.
Okay. And then also, I believe you're doing something with the grading so that water drains away from the building.
Yes, yeah, in a few areas, the water wants to not drain towards the storm drains that are there, so we are regrading the exterior of the building to get the water to flow away.
Okay. Then 5.06, contract for Central High School foundation repair. Talk to us about that.
During a project this past summer, we noticed that in the front of Central High School, the foundation is moving slightly. So we worked with an architect and structural engineer, and we're going to put some piers in to stabilize everything from moving.
Okay.
So how far down did you have to drill until you hit bedrock?
So we're anticipating going down 20 feet with the piers. Central High School, there's kind of been there are large rocks underneath that facility. We've hit them before when we've tried boring electric underneath the building. So we've done some soil samples and we know they're there and they're very solid. So yep, so that we're going to drill down and put the piers right there.
So hopefully that will 20 feet down, I would think, would keep any further issues from happening then.
Yes, yeah.
And then the next item, talk to us about restroom renovations at Vogel Elementary School.
Yeah, so this is all the student restrooms at Vogel School. Um, I really don't know when they were originally put in, but they are in need of a renovation, and we're going to bring up the ADA compliance. They're going to be tile from ceiling to floor with some of the new cleaning systems. It's almost like a little pressure washer where you put the disinfectant cleaner, and our goal is to spray the entire restroom down and then push it towards a floor drain so we can disinfect better and in a lot more effective manner.
And really nice restroom facilities for the students attending Vogel.
They will be nice.
We talk about this all the time, Dr. Smith. I think today's a great example. Everything Daryl's talked about. Some are more of those more obvious repairs, whether it's a bathroom renovation, painting the exterior. But then some, when you're talking about digging 20 feet down or HVAC, all of the things in his area have to be done with the square footage you talked about, 50 facilities, all different ages. That's how we make sure everything stays looking the way that's very best across the entire district.
Yes, and Daryl was on the forefront when we think about ionization and purifying the air. During COVID, he had already done a lot of research and work, and we had installed systems on several of our schools to purify the air because the inside environment we know is also very important for our students. And just anyone that's listening, if you are cold or if you're hot, your ability to concentrate and focus probably is diminished somewhat. So that's why what Daryl does is so important. And I have seen it written on his whiteboard that how does this impact student achievement?
Mhm.
So from facilities to transportation to food service to our teachers, everybody is focused on how do we help students achieve.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate at the EVSC when COVID-19 came around because all of our systems were already designed to bring in fresh air, and that was our biggest way to treat it is to flush our buildings with air. So that was existing, and then we also back it up with the bipolar ionization. We've had really good success at the EVSC with that.
Thank you.
Well, Daryl, you've shared a lot of great information with us today. We appreciate taking time out of your very busy schedule to do this, and we look forward to having you back some other time to talk about more facility issues in the EVSC.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Smith, now we're going to go back to the beginning of our information items.
Yes, so item 5.01, consideration of the agreement with MBI Worldwide. So this is for a company that does our background checks for our new employees as well as for our existing employees. Clearly, new employees have to have background checks for wherever they've lived. And then existing employees, there's a statutory requirement that requires us to have a background check every 5 years for our existing employees. So this is going to a vendor that we actually had used previously that had outstanding customer service. Unfortunately, the vendor that we have now has been increasing lag time, and I think that we have probably missed out on some really good candidates because we can't get their background screen uh, uh, back in enough time in a timely fashion to hire them. Sometimes it's been extending out weeks, and that's not the kind of customer service that we expect. So we are excited to go back to MBI.
And you talked about that with the board last night. You said basically that same thing. That is a vital component, one which we take very seriously, of the hiring process. And if we're trying to get employees hired on with EVSC, we've got to make sure that is efficient. And hopefully this will be a step in making that happen.
That's correct.
All right, Dr. Smith, we'll keep moving through our information items, and we actually are going to switch out and have a new special guest with us today. So we appreciate Daryl coming in, and now we're going to turn our attention to Stacy Mauser. Stacy, you are the Chief Technology Officer, and you've been with EVSC for many years with a lot of expertise. So we thank
you were going to ask me how many years, and
No,
I didn't
no.
practice that.
We won't ask you that, nor your age. We
Good,
don't
thank
ask
you. I
questions
appreciate
like
that.
that. So, but we do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule as well. And you know, David, I think the interesting thing is we have two people with us today that you see the results, you see the fruits of their department's labor and their expertise, but you may not know all the work that goes in behind that. We are, as you say all the time, such a technology rich school corporation, and that happens because of the behind the scenes expertise. And it's great to have Stacy to share everything that goes in with this.
It certainly is. And, since my tenure with EVSC, we really had like no technology. Of course, I've been with EVSC for a few decades. And now we view technology just like we view electricity. If it's not there, it's like, oh my gosh, you know. It's somewhat akin to if your power goes out in your house, you probably still go into a room and flip the light switch on, even though the power's out, just by habit. And I think that's the same kind of mentality we now have toward the internet. I think we are the largest wireless consumer in this entire region.
Right. I agree. If we're doing our job right, you don't know about us. You only hear from us if you need help. And we want to make sure that everything's running smoothly at all times. And that first bid item is the network. So if you want to just jump right into that information item.
Let's do that. So this takes us then to information item 5.02, consideration of the network infrastructure upgrade bid. That sounds really big, really complicated. So talk to us about what that means.
So what we do is every year we file for E-rate, and E-rate is a federal program that provides discounts to schools and libraries. So we're
So it's
fortunate.
not unique to us. It's for all
not
school
unique to
districts.
us, and there's a timeline that you have to follow in order to get those discounts. So we make sure that we follow those guidelines, and because of that, we get 80% discounts on anything related to delivering internet to the classroom. So our wide area network that hooks all our buildings together, our network connection, our switches that bring the signal into the buildings, and then our wireless access points, and that we fully take advantage of those discounts in order to keep all of our schools up to date. And you mentioned the size of the network. All of our wireless access points are updated now because of the E-rate program, and I think we're up to 2,300 wireless access points in the district, and have probably 25,000 at least devices that hit our network at any time during the day. So
So when we talk about wireless access points, we have to be concerned not only about coverage, but also density. So
right.
could you talk about those two concepts?
Sure, and that's probably a more common thing now. When wireless first came out, people weren't as relying on it as they are now. But now we have to make sure that we wire our classrooms to not just have one person be able to get on with maybe their teacher computer in the front of the building. We have to make sure that 30 students in the classroom can get on, so that we can do testing, so that they can get to their digital resources, and you just have to wire the building and pick out hardware that's going to handle that type of volume.
And when you talk about volume too, you're talking all schools, all grade levels. And I think, David started by saying about, it's like flipping a light switch. You expect it to always come on. You expect it to work. That's not just our high school teachers. I mean, kindergarten and first grade
Right.
teachers, when the network's not working properly, it kind of throws them too, because that is so embedded in how they're teaching. And that's even with 5 and 6-year-olds.
It is. I mean, it's in our 13th year to have one-to-one in our high schools. I think that's right. Or do I need to add 4 more
13th or
years?
14th.
Yes.
So, and now, I mean, our elementary schools have always had access to technology in their classrooms, but now we've flipped over to one-to-one in all grades K through 12. So yeah, they're more relying on the technology to just deliver their instruction on a daily basis. So we have to make sure that that's available to them, and plan ahead as their needs grow. We have to make sure we've built a network that can handle that growth.
Yeah, and just like Daryl talked about having to plan ahead, I mean, you have to always be planning ahead, looking where we're going, not where we're
Right.
at.
Right, and it's not just the internet. There's things that we do in house, and previously we may have had a server in house, and maybe that resource is now out in the cloud somewhere. So we have to watch our internet, not just our wireless. We have to make sure that we're increasing our internet access as well.
And Stacy does a great job of planning ahead and being able to look around the corner so that we are prepared for the future. But then when the pandemic hit and we utilized big spaces in ways that we never had before, for instance, we would utilize our auditoriums in the high schools because we could spread a lot of kids out in a big space and they would not be very close together. But we really had not wired our auditoriums to have that kind of density for wireless. So not only does she do a great job of planning ahead, but also her folks are very nimble and are able to adjust really on a dime so that our kids can continue to have access to all of the incredible resources that we provide for our students.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like at North, when that building was built, we never thought we needed to provide a lot of wireless access in a gymnasium. So we just had one access point in the gym. So if the radio station needed to get on and broadcast, we could provide that, or the scoreboard needed access. Well, now, during the pandemic times, or when we were doing social distancing, they were bringing classrooms of kids in. So it was important that we increase the wireless capacity in those gymnasiums, which now the schools all have that capability and can think about different ways they can use that wireless capability after the pandemic. So I like it that we've invested in that. It's not a waste just for the pandemic, and it's just brought us up to a new level of support.
And I think in many ways the pandemic showed just where we were and how our dedication to technology really paid dividends because we were prepared as much as you can be for something that kind of comes out of left field. But then for those areas where we saw immediately there could be potential issues, like Dr. Smith's example of an auditorium or your example of a gymnasium, we had the systems in place to quickly provide support, make things happen so that everyone could operate the way they needed
Yeah,
to.
agree. I think we were in so much of a better place than most school districts. Our teachers, our teachers were more comfortable using technology. So when they sent their kids home and they had to use Google Classroom, they were a lot more prepared than some of these districts that maybe had dabbled in technology a little
Sure.
bit, but not made it a priority, and maybe didn't have the support and the devices in the kids' hands.
And one of the things I love about these podcasts is not only does it increase transparency so the public can see exactly all of the board action that they've taken in a particular board meeting and can go back actually to 2008 on board docs and see every single board meeting from 2008 till the current time. I think it also gives our listeners a view into the window, if you will, of things that no one would even consider, I think, unless they were a frequent listener to our podcast. So having Daryl talk about the ionization of the air to purify the air so that we do know through our studies that the schools that were early adopters of that had fewer incidents of flu, and then the pandemic hit, and thank God we were prepared with those units. And then I think people once again kind of subscribe their home wireless with what we have at school, but two very, very different things. And but it's great that our students and our faculty can come in and the internet just happens because of the work that Stacy and her crew do.
Well, and the work that teachers have done too. We've got a
Oh,
lot of,
absolutely.
we've provided a lot of PD and preparing them, and they've taken advantage of that and learned on their own. And one of the things that what I am very grateful for is teachers. Maybe in the olden days, they would try something and call us. Oh, I'm trying to do this; it doesn't work. Now they're very careful about testing something out, planning for it, so that we're not in a panic. We can help them and get them over a technology bump. I know we appreciate that as a tech support group.
Well, and last thing then I'll add about, since we're in this item talking about network infrastructure, would I be correct in saying, Stacy, any entity, any company, corporation, you can invest as much as you want into the devices themselves, into the computers, into the tablets. If you don't have the network infrastructure in place, it makes that almost
Yeah,
meaningless.
we're so reliant on the internet and the cloud right now, moving from an inside or an internal mail system to Google out in the cloud. We rely on our internet to do our daily work now. So that network is crucial to doing our
Okay.
business.
You know, it would have been interesting to have Daryl talk a little bit about how the internet, the HVAC systems, how they're all tied into our wireless system, and they can be controlled by an iPad 3 counties away.
Sure, our departments are very intertwined
Sure.
now, and we have those discussions a lot. Just the technology in their area relies on us. So when they get ready to purchase something, they'll bring us over and say, "Okay, I need an internet connection for this controller, for this piece." Security cameras; those
Right.
fall under facilities too, and we're
Key
all
fobs.
key fobs, door access, intercom systems. All of those things are facilities and rely on technology. So we work together.
Once again, a lot goes on behind the scenes when you're dealing with a large district
Yep.
like we are. So let's move to the next item, 5.04, or actually 5.03, consideration of new tech laptop bid. And you talked to the board a little bit about that. New Tech is one of our high schools. They have a unique programming that they use in terms of it's very project based. And they have, well, talk to us about that. Why are they on here?
Sure, that's just a separate order, and just like Daryl has to prepare, I had to prepare a little bit earlier for my student devices. These are all on a 4-year replacement cycle, and it's time to replace those. And normally, I would be able to wait until maybe after spring break to issue those bids, but in order to get the equipment in time for start of school, we're starting a little bit early this time. But that particular school, like you said, is project based, and they load a lot of software on their device. So we work with the principal out there, Chris Gibson, and we actually did a survey of all the students and asked them what platform would work best for you, because our other high school students use a Chromebook. So we just kind of let them decide, would you like a Chromebook? Is that something that you think would be a good device for you, or do you rely on that Windows laptop? Because a Windows laptop can work without the network, and you can load software on it, versus the Chromebook is pretty much a cloud internet type of device. So we let them provide that feedback, and we'll work with Book Fund in order to set up the payment of those, and they've got the device that they need to get their work done.
Okay, very good. And then that takes us to the last item that you were on for last night, Stacy, consideration of high school Chromebook bids.
So again, we're on our 4th year for our high school device, so it's time to refresh those. And we had, I think, 7 vendors that provided us with a proposal, and We'll look at Chromebooks again. We provide accidental damage coverage on all of those devices in order to be able to better manage our repair cycle. Uh, Look at things like, do we need cases, shells for those? And just overall, I mean, the Chromebook has been a great device for the high school and middle school, and we're continuing to go on that path since we are using more and more of Google Classroom and the Google Suite in our classrooms.
And again, this particular item on the agenda was for high school
Right.
Chromebooks. So you don't necessarily replace all of the devices for all students in the same year then.
So next year will be middle school. They'll
Okay.
be up for a refresh. And what's nice, and that kind of goes, you're probably going to ask, one of the things that was brought up in the board meeting last night was that Google end of life date. One of the things we asked the vendors to provide is how long will your device be supported? And the majority of the devices had an end of life date of 2026, which sounds great because we'll use those high school devices through 2026. But what we'll end up doing is we like to use those devices for spares in the middle schools or even in the elementary too. So we're looking at the low bid there that their device will actually be supported through 2029. And that just means it'll get updates from Chrome updates that make sure that they're getting the security updates and make sure that the devices are safe on our network and safe for our kids to use.
And I know that's another area your department is very laser focused on, and that's security.
Yep. That's if there's a guilt trip or a worry or a something that we really are trying to up our game with, what everybody's trying to up their game with is that whole area of cybersecurity.
That's probably something that keeps people in your
Uh,
position across the country, no matter who you work for, up at night. Just thinking about that because
Mhm.
it's constantly evolving and changing.
Yeah, if you look at any surveys of people in my position, you know what keeps you up late
Yeah.
at night, and that's what it is. It's cybersecurity. So we just want to make sure our student data is safe, our employee data is safe, and making sure that outside entities aren't taking advantage of our network because that's what happens to some school corporations that they'll try to hijack our nice big network and use it for evil, not for good. So we want to make sure our network is safe and our data is safe.
I think Dr. Smith, the moral of this story is thank goodness we have people like Stacy and her team because there is a lot that goes on to make this continue to operate so that our students are the ones who will ultimately benefit from the technology.
Correct. And she could have talked about filters and other things that we have to make certain that our sites are safe that they
Mhm.
access. But, one of the things, as I alluded to earlier, that I think is so valuable about the podcast is it really does give the public a glimpse into those things that you probably don't even realize exist. I know until I started working actually even in central office, but somewhat as administrator, that you view the school as the school. That's where it starts and that's where it ends. And I love that perception of that, but there is so much that has to take place to support our schools so that our schools don't have to worry about facilities, so their schools don't worry about technology, so that they know it will always be there. And in that rare event when it goes down, that we have a talented, dedicated team that will get that internet back up and running as soon as possible.
Well, Stacy, once again, thank you for taking time out of your daily agenda and daily schedule today to come in. This has been very helpful information, and we'll have you back as well, just like Daryl, because you're able to elaborate and share some really good information with us.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
Sure. All right, David. Then that takes us really through all the information items and really leaves us with continued business. And I know last night you talked a bit about COVID and a bit about legislation. Don't know if you want to share any of that.
Well, grateful that the positive cases are trending downward. In fact, it is about half of what it was the previous week. So we're grateful for that. We hope that this surge now is on the waning moments, and I would love for it to be gone permanently.
As would many, many people.
Yes. So I don't know that we will be out of the red next week, but I think it certainly is trending in a very positive direction for the first time in a long time. And then I did address, as we all know, the General Assembly is in session now, and I did address House Bill 1134. And basically, I think ultimately what I would want to restate is that we have the citizens of Vanderbilt County that elect school board members to exercise those and to make those decisions, to have that local control element over our local schools. Um, House Bill 1134, I think much has been written about it. It really does put so much additional pressure on a teacher in ways that are really not sound from a pedagogical perspective. Uh, to expect a teacher at the beginning of the year to put their content out on the internet so that everyone could access it, um, really does take away the understanding of the interaction between the art and science of teaching, so that teachers then really would be, I think, very hesitant to make those real time, on your feet adjustments that excellent teachers do day in and day out. And even if that's reduced down to 30 days, I think that's incredibly problematic. I cannot imagine being a brand new teacher or a veteran teacher that's teaching a subject that they haven't taught before that would be able to, before school starts, even put up 30 days worth of lesson planning. So I think individuals that are trying to um, make that requirement upon our teachers really don't understand education and the educational process. We trust our teachers because they have been trained as a teacher. They have that certification. Not easy to come by, same as it is for doctors and attorneys and others where there is some kind of accrediting agency. And frankly, I will say this again, I think the voters of Vanderburgh County know best what they want EVSC to be, as opposed to somebody in Indianapolis that may have never ventured into Vanderburgh County before. And we already have school board approved policies in place that allow for parents to see the curriculum and to do all of those things. So I think it's an overreach. I think it's overly burdensome. And I think, frankly, it will continue to make the profession of teaching a less than desirable profession to enter into. And when we are already in the midst of a teacher shortage, and we already have universities saying that they are seeing fewer and fewer and fewer students going into the field of education, at some point in time, I hope we realize that the actions in Indianapolis have a direct impact on our school system. And I hope that it's not too late. Because frankly, living in the tri state area, we're just a few miles away from Illinois, just a few miles away from Kentucky. And frankly, I only want the best and brightest educators in EVSC. That's all I want. And I don't want them to be disincentivized to work here in Indiana. So I would implore the General Assembly, let those kind of issues remain under local control. I trust the voters of Vanderburgh County. I wish Indianapolis would too.
Well said. I think you made that same case last night and shared that with our elected 7 school board members, and hopefully that will resonate with individuals. Not very often that you get into some issues like this, but I know this is one you feel strongly about.
It
So,
certainly is. I believe in the value of our educators, and I believe in the voters of Vanderburgh County.
okay. Well, thanks for those comments. I think that really does make sense for people, hopefully, and appreciate our guests coming in today. This has been very helpful. We've covered a lot of ground as we always try to in these. So thank you, Dr. Smith, for spending time, and we'll do this again in 2 weeks after the next board meeting.
Sounds great.